Great. I'm here with Bill Richards on Gone Phishing with myself, Andrew Speer, and today we're joined and we're going to talk about phishing and recruitment. Plus, there's maybe an interesting personal example, Bill. So why don't we start off? Great to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your interest in the topic.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Well, I think it's clearly a fascinating subject overall, personally and from a business perspective. But I've been in and out of recruitment for most of my career, not necessarily by design. The past 20 years, really, I've got sort of solid, what you call, online recruitment job board, senior leadership experience. So I started off at a company called Financial Careers, which is financial services job board, built out the Benelux and then French business there, and then was approached by Indeed, who I'm sure we all know and love, back in 2013. It was sort of wild west days. Nobody had really heard of Indeed, believe it or not, in the UK. Nobody certainly knew how aggregation or CPCs or that supply and demand sort of type business model worked. So then built up that business in the UK and Ireland, France initially, and sort of 400 heads in sales alone, and the ARR that goes with that. So yeah, an exciting career, and I've also been a read.co.uk as well. So seeing it from many different aspects, and now I'm consulting for businesses, particularly a lot of sort of smaller, early stage startup AI businesses, mainly within the HR tech space.
Nice. And that shift from big company to sort of consulting, obviously they've got the frameworks of a big company, but now you're applying it to, are they AI first companies, or are they enabling AI to do recruitment better? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, typically AI first, because I think one of the advantages, of course, of the smaller startup businesses is that they're able to move very rapidly. They're able to design something from scratch. I think it's fairly evident in the current climate that if you're in the HR tech space, if you're not AI first or integrating to some significant level AI, in your product roadmap, then probably you're going to come up short. So these businesses are designed very much from that perspective, as opposed to more traditional businesses that some of whom I've worked with or for in the past, where that they're sort of iterating and changing and developing as they go, and AI didn't exist when they first launched, for example. So quite different.
So what do you think the opportunities are for these the startups that you're seeing that maybe Reed or Indeed aren't doing? Because obviously they have huge. I have a friend at Reed, and I have had some conversations with him, and they're doing quite a few things, but obviously they're not as nimble. Do you find, this is maybe a leading question, but what I've always seen with the AI companies, they can do one thing really specific and really, really well, that maybe it's almost like that market of one, and that comes back to fraud as well. But it's like, how do we serve one person really, really well, exactly how they want, versus a wider service? That's a leading question, obviously, but have you seen that, or do you disagree, or what do you think?
I know, completely agree, and I think that word a lot, I like that you use a lot, nimble or lack of nimbleness, is the crux of the matter. So even Indeed has been around for 20 years, was always, well, you couldn't even call it AI first, because nobody really talked about artificial intelligence unless you were looking at science fiction. So certainly the leader with machine learning and LLMs and data. But that built up to a business. In 2013, I think it was employee 1,000, built up to about 14,000 people globally. Very US dominant, of course, and increasingly became less nimble, and a bigger corporation that had shareholders that it was answering to, and almost like that tanker, struggling to turn around rapidly. Conversely, you would see a business like read.co.uk, which hadn't been AI first, and Reed prides itself as being the UK's original job board, and feels very much like the UK's original job board. And so, what was as a smaller team is able to be more nimble and make decisions much more rapidly, but won't have the technical experience and expertise and strength of data that a business like Indeed may have. So a lot of these other companies, who are coming into the market, if they can just chip away at some of Indeed's revenue streams, when you're talking about a $7-8 billion US global business, even if they chip away at a fraction of a percent of some of their revenue, then makes it a £1 million business. So there's lots to be excited about for some of these small businesses, and they can pivot and create something from scratch that is, to your point, very much tailored to a specific function and particular ROI or outcome for customers, which is quite different.
Yeah, I think I find that fascinating. Just sort of the market that potentially wouldn't have been worth going after when it's 6 months to build a product, whereas now you can go, okay, that specific person does this, needs that, and it might only be a couple $100,000 a year, but you can build something that is exactly for them. They'll be a customer for life, and it's you've cornered that market, because that is the thing. Do you think there'll be a consolidation at some point between these very nimble companies, or is it too early to tell?
Yeah, I believe so. Whilst I think, if you look at it holistically, the industry, or the economy rather, or the jobs economy to be precise, is a tougher place to be than it was pre-COVID. I forget the precise figures, but Indeed in particular tracks through its hiring lab data the number of open vacancies in all markets. But the UK in particular, compared to the other core global markets, so let's say the US, France, DACH region, etc., has been the one that's been hit most significantly. So there has been quite a percentage drop, which inevitably changes that balance of supply and demand in the market. So on the one hand, one could argue that there's fewer opportunity for competing businesses, big and small, to go after, but equally, there are so many companies that could be better serviced. Then I think there's huge opportunity for a lot of these businesses. I'm sure quite a few of these smaller startup, Series A HR tech businesses will get snapped up and acquired, as I witnessed during my time at Indeed. Various businesses that were absorbed into Indeed, either to latch onto that technology and build that into a product offering, or to shut it down and remove some of the competition from the market. So some of these businesses clearly won't survive. They're bootstrapped. I've worked with some of those where they're it's quite evident that they should be watching the pennies, because pennies are scarce, but the kernel of that idea can be really fantastic and exciting.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you've still got all of the hurdles to sell to big businesses, right? So even though you're nimble, you can create the tech very quickly. It's once you come up against the compliance checklist for selling to, say, a Reed or an Indeed, or even one of the big enterprise clients, it's still the same thing, right? So you've got, even though the product's quick to make, and that's something that hasn't always been the case, but you could always make a product, and it's always been an issue of going out, selling it, marketing, getting traction. And so the product life cycle is a lot shorter, but it just means that you can't procrastinate by building the product anymore. You actually have to get out and do the hard work, I think.
Yeah, and investors obviously want to see that this is scalable, that there's some longevity there. They want to see increasingly, what is the lifetime value of customers, and are they making any money yet? Because a lot of these companies, they have some amazing ideas, but to your point, if they don't gain traction in the market, they don't start to knock on the appropriate doors and identify their ISPs and go after the right customers for them as a business, it can be the best idea in the world. And suddenly had the VHS Betamax thing sort of pop into my head. Right, I think it was universally acknowledged that Betamax was the better system, but NHS for whatever reason, VHS for whatever reason had best marketing and scale and distribution, what have you. So that's certainly not lost on me.
No, that's a good. It's really good to keep in mind. You still got to get out there, validate. Make sure that you're actually building something that's useful. And I think just before we move on to sort of the concerns of AI, one thing I was thinking about in my head today is the difference between being an AI sort of enabled company and using AI to build the tools to make your company more efficient. And what I mean by that is, as we're seeing right now, is lot of people have come on board. Credit usage, they've got all this AI cost, they've added it, but it's variable. So before you're building a piece of tech, it's pretty much a fixed cost. You develop it, it runs, it goes. Now people have sort of AI enabled their business, and it's now a variable cost. And so the way that I continue to look at this is, how can you use AI to build technology that is scalable? So how can you use it to develop the thing that then is just a piece of tech? And I think that is almost, I believe, it's a slightly more sensible way of looking at it, because you can build the things that you couldn't before, but it will only have the infrastructure costs not related with AI. And so I think there's going to be a lot of companies who've gone headfirst into this, reduced headcount, and then all of a sudden Anthropic triples their AI bill, and they go, well, that's not a saving anymore at all. So there might be an interesting reckoning coming. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is. And I'm sure a lot of CEOs throughout the land, not just within HR tech and recruitment, are, I've seen a few memes on LinkedIn and other places. What do we need? We need AI. Okay, what do we need it for? We don't know. Just gotta, here's a few million quid. Go and get it. And
tell me what we need. Yeah, I've got I know we're talking slightly off topic, but I've got a friend who runs an economics business in Athens, and they've actually resisted using AI at all over the last 3 or 4 years, and all they do is they do human analyzed reporting for sort of growing markets, and they've actually stuck to their guns. They have good systems behind hand, but now people are going, actually, we only trust you guys because you have someone who sits in Sofia reading the daily paper, writes it down, and tells us about it. And so they've just gone, nope, we're not going to do it. We're going to continue to grow, and they're in a really good position now. And so I love this. So
well, no, I think that slight digression, but I think that's absolutely relevant. And I'm certainly hearing and seeing in the recruitment space that one of the probably unforeseen outcomes of the advent of AI. No one was talking about AI until generative AI kicked in, a couple of years ago, ChatGPT, etc. All of a sudden, it's clearly seemingly the only thing that people are thinking about. But part of that, the outcomes, particularly in a human relationship-driven business like recruitment, increasingly clients and job seekers are craving that human interaction, because yes, AI absolutely can refine and expedite certain things, make processes more efficient largely, but clearly people are desperate still to have those human interactions, which is critical to matching. It's like a Match.com thing. You want to match a candidate who has skills and desires and ambitions that the matches the needs and the aspirations of the customer. And it's that's a very, very, very human relationship driven equation.
And for me, that's the ideal outcome. I've got some friends, they run an exec recruitment business for banks. And the way we're always talking about this, and the way I look at it, how can you get rid of all the crap in the background so that you can just be better talking to people? So how can you have more better conversations with people? Because that's how their business is built, right? If you take away that, then you might as well work with anyone. But how can you make sure all the admin, the boring stuff, moving data between systems is done so that you can spend more time on the phone? And that's, I think that's what people will want.
And I think AI is built and geared up for that. If used correctly, should make like any job, being a recruitment consultant, which I haven't been for years, but going back some time, it's a laborious task. Like a lot of sales jobs, it's a lot of crunching through, knocking on doors that don't open as you would like, and sorting the wheat from the chaff. And so AI absolutely should be there to make those processes more efficient for salespeople and recruiters and hiring managers, etc. But it can't take away that human element. And part of the the challenge in the current market post-COVID is what I call the AI arms race, which is where you've got job seekers on one side. Maybe I'm digressing slightly, but who are using all these tools to, they're desperate. There are few vacancies in the market, many more layoffs. Many more people, much more competition in the market if you're looking for a job. And so everyone is just sending these applications sporadically to using AI tools. And myself in my own job search, whenever I need to write a cover letter, I think, oh my word, so will I use AI? Yeah, absolutely. Not I will refine it and use it as a basis for sending that. And then on the other side, you have customers who are just inundated, therefore, with a myriad applications, 200, 300, 400, majority of which aren't relevant to the skills they're searching for. And so it's just like piling on top on both sides, whereas, so it's really gone from that quality to a quantity type conversation now, which is the opposite way of how it should be in reality.
Have you ever heard of Vizzy? Vizzy? It's a interactive CV. So you don't just text, but you'll upload video. You'll maybe psychometrics. It's interesting. You should check it out. I'm not sure how long, but they've just raised again. But that's the kind of thing that I believe is really fascinating, because it allows you to show your personality. You have to invest time into it. You've shown it's really good for creative industries. I think they have Burberry, and they have these big companies who actually want people who go, actually, I'm going to take more time than just putting it through Claude and just here you go. Because you're right, it's like I make it in Claude, I summarize it in Claude, I don't read it. It's just like all of this extra stuff that's created that no one reads in the end, and no one benefits.
Yeah, and then people are running, CVs through an anti-AI checker or whatever, and it's the whole world's got a bit nuts for it.
Yeah, it's a bit reductive, but okay. So we've got a bit of opportunity, a bit of challenge. So flip side, what do you think the recruitment industry is concerned about? So we talk a lot about deep fakes, and we've talked about job applications from people who don't exist or live in different countries. What do you think some of the biggest concerns facing recruitment firms are, or agencies?
I think I think AI certainly has exacerbated a lot of those challenges. So as I say, if you're a recruitment consultant for, I don't know, Michael Page, Rob Waters, whoever that might be, it's for many years it's been a very labor intensive, tough job. When I was Computer Futures with the S3 group, loved my time there, but I've never been in a more salesy environment. It was, yes, we enjoy getting people jobs, but it was tough, and there's a lot of pressure there to deliver for the client. And so I don't think that's changed, but AI has almost created this veil of mystique, and there's much less clarity than there would have been some time ago as to really understanding whether that candidate has the skill set that they're saying they have. And again, when I go back to my recruitment times, which is a long time ago, I used to place IT contractors, and so I'd be, I know what I'd be looking for if it were a Java developer or a Unix, administrator or what have you, and be able to have sort of high-level conversations with those individuals. But even then, it was, you had to ask the appropriate questioning to work out whether they were just trying to hoodwink you or not. I think in today's climate, it's so much harder when you get so many applicants, probably, to really understand whether, when someone has something quite specific on their CV, a language was Swahili or something. If you don't speak that language, you're never going to be able to work out whether that's true or not. And so I think that is it must be much tougher for a recruiter to really find those golden nuggets of candidates, and they probably have to qualify so many more. They can stack rank them using AI tools, of course, but because everyone feels that they need to put that veneer of AI over everything they do these days.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's because I've talked to a couple CTOs who say that junior developers, they're basically gone, right? Effectively you've got senior developers who've been around for 20 years, junior, mid-level 10 to whatever, and then anyone who's coming through right now is like, well, why would I learn to code? And so right now you're going to have even more valuable the senior people, because they know what they're looking for, they know how to do it. But me, for example, if I went to a Java thing, I'm not a developer by any means, but I could turn out some Java pretty quickly if you got me to do something. But then it would take someone, as you said, on the other side looking at it going, well, obviously he does not know what he's doing because it has twice as much code or whatever it is. So you're going to lose the experts. And if I was coming up right now, 5 years ago, I don't have any children, but you think in schools, they're like, all right, coding is the future, go do coding. 5 years, and now you go, all right, no one needs to code anymore. And so you've got this shift. And so the future, I don't know are there experts? How are the people who remain, who haven't gone off and made their millions, are they more valuable because they're the only ones who remember how to do it properly? Or
quite possibly, right? And AI, like any technology, always displaces roles in the jobs market. You go back to, I don't know, people were paranoid about, I don't know, the creation of the motor car, for example, what that was going to do for horses and etc. That often changes a lot. But yeah, I think there are going to be absolutely those individuals who have been doing this for some time, and not AI, I don't mean, but a certain technology. Again, going back to my recruitment days, there was a consultant I worked with who was very successful, who dealt with mainframe technologies. And so as soon as he found somebody who was, coding in COBOL or whatever it was, who would work at an investment bank, he had a placement, because he would go and then pitch this candidate to, who was looking for a move, to all the major investment banks, and they were kind of fighting over him because they're already rare, and because a lot of people wouldn't want to learn that old-fashioned technology because it wasn't considered forward thinking. But maybe AI turns everything on its head, so it's interesting and hard to know where this will be.
Yeah. The banks are an interesting one, because until I've never worked at a bank, my CTO has, but the tech, you think banks are forward looking, they've got this cutting edge tech, but everything's built on like a 30-year-old stack that's just pieced together and bolted on. And so actually the person who knows how this thing works is probably worth whatever they want, because this thing can't break. And so you've got all these people, all these AI systems, but the money is actually making sure that Barclays' main reconciliation doesn't break, or whatever it is.
I have a good friend of mine who designs apps for one of the major retail banks in the UK, and he's kind of frightened with the sort of lack of deep technical knowledge that some of these banks have. And so, having been worked in the industry as a contractor previously, and so yeah, it may look shiny, sexy and shining from looking from the outside in, but probably isn't. Yeah.
No, I think that's why when I first left university, I wanted to go start a business immediately. And my dad, who ran a company for forever, he's like, just go work in a couple companies, because you'll realize that no one knows what they're doing. Everyone's making it up, and you can figure it out. And so being on the inside, you go, okay, actually, someone started this, someone's patched it together. It looks like they know what they're doing, but you can try it. So it's a good learning. So phishing. So you said you have a personal example. Do you want to start with that one, or do you have a professional one as well?
We'll make professional quickly. So depending on what your classification of phishing is.
Well, everyone has a different type. So why don't you just go, because I like to hear about all sorts. So
so I've not really had I think we've all experienced dodgy phishing, I don't know, WhatsApps and what have you, genuinely trying to get bank details out of individuals, if that's what you mean. My time at Indeed, leading the UK business, I literally had the police turn up once in Farringdon, knocking on our door because they'd been approached. I was trying to find the name of the organisation they work for, but two policemen, because they had been contacted due to the proliferation of fake jobs on the Indeed website in the UK. Now, what I have to say in Indeed's defence, they are militant, in a good way, largely. They have a big, search quality team that will do their utmost to identify through use of technology and human, intervention, to find fake jobs or spammy jobs, or jobs that they perceive not to be in the job seeker's best interest. Perhaps training courses that you need to pay 50 quid, 100 quid in order to go on this course, and there's no guarantee of an actual vacancy at the end of it. Things such as that. But of course, when you're dealing with literally hundreds of thousands of vacancies in the UK alone and millions globally, Indeed, that's a tall task. And so, but they did take that extremely seriously. Just as I like to believe, Trustpilot, for example, in their world, will look to take down fake reviews, which so I certainly saw that a lot. From my Indeed days, we did have some irate customers who were saying, Bill, we've had 10 people turn up on our door who were expecting to start at 9 a.m. on the morning, and this morning, and we know nothing about these individuals or the vacancies, and so I'm not quite sure how that works. Whether they signed up for something, and there was some money changed hands, but clearly they had been peddled fake jobs from some organization. So that does happen. And
it's a motive. It's an emotive thing as well. You're looking for a job. You might be getting to the end of your.
Yeah.
And I will go do it, and maybe you ignore the flag. So it's that sort of that pressure, not coercion, but pressure. You need money. It's here. It seems a bit dodgy, but okay, let's go do it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of, again, this taps into the human interaction piece, particularly in recruitment. Trust is, I think, even more valuable or important these days than it was 2 years ago, because people don't know, as they used to, who they can really depend upon and trust in the process, because they're not necessarily dealing with a human being, And even my kids, I've got 3 young kids, but even Eliza, who's 9, she will send an image, or read something. Oh, probably AI, she'll say, and that's what they're growing up with. They, which is kind of a shame that the children of that age are just always second guess whether something is real or not. It's their kind of their default position.
It's sad, and it's good, because I think there's a lot of people who don't realize the proliferation yet of content, especially, and so having that skepticism. And one of my beliefs right now is that we're going to see this big swing back to in-person analog things, that you go, I was definitely there, I can prove it happened, therefore it was a thing. Or the rise of film cameras, or whatever it is, where you go, took it once, exposed it, okay, great, yep, I was definitely there, that's not been edited. Because I have a Google Pixel, and it has this interesting feature where you might have seen this, where you take a photo, and then the photographer can go get into the frame, and one of the people from the photo comes out, takes the next photo, and then it stitches them together.
I've vaguely seen something online about yeah.
Interesting. It's great, because you have 3 people and you want a group photo, but then you go, well, who took that photo? In a couple of years, you'd be like, was there someone else there with us? Did that actually happen? And that never actually happened. And so you were getting to that, quickly to that point. So it's great.
The old adage, the camera never lies, isn't necessarily the case. That we, again, in digression, we went to Guernsey in the Channel Islands recently, because it was my father's 80th, and he's an islander. I went to see his house where he grew up, called Norton House, and unfortunately, a lovely grand house, but had scaffolding. They're repairing the roof. Of course, just put that through ChatGPT. Please, could you remove the scaffolding? Amazing picture, but it's so there are fantastic elements to it, such as that. And we were talking about DIY before. I use ChatGPT a lot to say, okay, when I finish this, just so there's that sort of North Star sort of motivation. Could you show me this? Okay. And so it has many applications like that socially, which I think is important.
There's great things. The memory is infallible anyway, right? Even like you don't remember things accurately even by yourself. So it's It's an interesting thing. But yeah, good your children are skeptical.
Yeah,
and
no, but it is a shame that's their, that's how they grow up. But there was a personal example that I had, which I'm still baffled at how the intricacy of this. So I was on holiday in Cornwall last year, applying for roles, and I just happened to mention a fairly innocuous comment randomly on LinkedIn about how there was a debate about AI and how AI, ChatGPT in particular, I think uses a lot of M dashes, which traditionally I do. Stylistically, I just like the long dash, and of course, increasingly now I'm reluctant to use it because everyone's going to think I've used AI to create something. And I just put a really brief comment in to responding to somebody's post saying, "Oh, love an M dash," something like that. And a couple of weeks later, just out randomly, somebody from allegedly from a major global recruiter, so it could be Waters, Page, Manpower, a company like that, responded and said, "Oh, just saw your M dash thing. By the way, please contact my colleague, Lucy Bellingham, because she's got a really interesting role, which I think would be a great match for you. When opportunity knocks, you should, every now and then you should jump at it." So I got through to this Lucy Bellingham, different name, can't remember, and so eventually she sent me a job description, and blew my mind. So a company I hadn't heard of, but in HR tech, money was really good. They were looking for somebody who had 20 years senior leadership experience. Tick. I'm a French and Spanish graduate, so they were looking for somebody who spoke foreign languages, in particular French and Spanish. You put in, and I thought, hey, hello.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And somebody who had spent X amount of time managing X amount of people with sort of more than $500,000 ARR, etc., etc. So it sounded too good to be true.
Yeah.
So I went through the process, and I sat there with a friend of mine, and we both looked, and Claire and I said, "That seems too perfect." So part of me thought, I'll always remember this day when this job description came through, and then the other when I was very skeptical. Anyway, so I went through the whole process expecting it to be something a little untoward, and inevitably an individual said, "Okay, well, if you want to succeed at this role, what we need to do to expedite your application is just to refine your CV so it matches the job description perfectly, etc." So I went through the process, and inevitably somebody from Nigeria sent me some bank details for sort of 450 quid to transfer in order so that they could update my CV to make my application more successful, which I anticipated was ultimately going to be the end of that by then. And it was just so the lengths it went to. And the AI, the language that it used was phenomenal, but it was just, its one failing was it was too perfect. It reflected, because obviously it clearly had my CV at this point, it had my LinkedIn profile. It was just me on a page in the job description.
How long? How many back and forths had you done with?
A few. There was it's probably lasted a week or more, certainly. And became more and more, not mysterious, but clearly my claxons were going off in my head. This individual, when I looked online, was based in Pennsylvania or somewhere, and I'd send a message, and it would be 3 a.m. there, and I'd get a reply pretty rapidly. Plus, of course, and I think this is one of the failings of a lot of companies like this, and I've had another one recently that. Not similar to this, but it's petered out. It would be like manpower.uk.com, for example, email address with a UK, not just a straight .com, or it will have a personal email address, or it'll be manpower1.com, and that normally, in my experience, tends to be the telltale sign that it's something a bit untoward.
Sorry.
But I was, on the one hand, horrified, dismayed, but flabbergasted and impressed at the lengths that someone would go to and I've been in the online recruitment space, as I say, for 20 years, and reasonably an intelligent individual, and if I can be hoodwinked, then there must have been quite a few people that have parted with their cash for things like that.
And it was subtle as well, and it wasn't, the bank details probably ticked you off at the end, but tipped you off. But that's the interesting thing, is that scams can be so specific now, and it doesn't have to have a high ROI, because you can make it exactly targeted to that person, and it's so cheap to run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I went through and looked at the individual who contacted me on my M- comment, and he had contacted other individuals on LinkedIn as well who I didn't know, in a not similar way. So it's very clever stuff. I have to say, but clearly not morally correct.
No, there was one I was talking to someone the other day on the podcast, and it was around a fake Dragon's Den product, or Shark's Tank, where they basically built the whole landing page for the product. They'd done press releases, videos of them being on Shark Tank, run adverts, and that was more, obviously, it was product fraud. But if you don't check carefully, or you don't sort of double check the language that they're using, you could be, oh, that is cool, because I watch Dragon's Den sometimes, but not all the time, so I wouldn't know whether a product did make it through or not. But if you saw enough hype and fake testimonials and video testimonials and ads and it's like you can create the whole world that you want someone to live in without them leaving the bubble, or you think you've left but you haven't.
I know, it's frightening. And not on a smaller scale, I think we've all had, I've certainly had instances where I've interviewed, gone through a couple of rounds, and guess what, then you have to do a presentation and put a go-to-market plan of 30, 60, 90 days, and spend a lot of time on it. You don't want to give them too much info, but you want to make it interesting, and then it all peters out.
True. And that we wouldn't call fraud. That's just free use of capability. So it's like it's a barometer of where you draw the line. That's a fascinating one. Well, I mean, thank you, Bill. This has been great. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover before we wrapped up? I think that was great.
No, not really. Thank you. Look, I really enjoyed the discussion. I think certainly in HR tech, the online recruitment space is, remains and has been for many years a dynamic space that is open and ripe to innovation, and clearly AI is front and center of that. I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff developing over the next few months and years. It's a very competitive space. There are lots of really exciting businesses out there, AI native, like Jack and Jill is one that springs to mind. And I don't know if you use that. I was blown away when I spoke to Jack. Probably one of the better exec search conversations I'd had, actually. I thought that was very clever tech. I don't think it's quite there yet, but so you can absolutely see value in it, but as we spoke about earlier, I do think there'll be this tide of change where emotionally people are going to desire more and more back to basics, sort of human interaction, knowing that they can trust an individual they see in front of them, which has been one of the unexpected outcomes of proliferation of AI, certainly within the recruitment industry. So I think some interesting times ahead of us.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate it. So thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.